Hey guys, so we're starting a new series. Obviously, we meet every Wednesday night at the Wilson Center on the campus of the First Real Baptist Church of Tampa. Our college ministry is The Bridge, and we've been doing that for about 4 years now. But every once in a while, we do a series, and we kind of feel like, maybe this is something that other people would benefit from. And actually, what we're starting to work on is a live stream for our Wednesday night get-togethers, because there might be some college students out of town or out of state that could maybe benefit from this, or they want to be able to watch it if maybe they don't have a place to watch. But obviously, anyway, it doesn't matter who you are, you're more than welcome to watch our live streams. However, at the moment, we don't have that capability yet. We're working on that. So we're still going to be recording these videos and then posting it so that you guys are still in the loop on what we're doing. So if you have any questions, feel free to comment or reach out to us. We'll be happy to give you more information about The Bridge and what we do, about our church, the First Real Baptist Church of Tampa, and all of that. So the series that we're doing, it's really, I guess you could say, it kind of comes from one of my favorite preachers named Matt Chandler, and it's called The Mingling of Souls. And it's all about relationships, dating, that kind of thing. But this is something that's going to apply to everybody, no matter like what phase of a relationship that you might be in, whether you're single or you're dating or you're starting to see somebody or you're married, whatever. I think this is going to apply to everybody. I kind of felt convicted because, as I said earlier, I've been doing this for 4 years now, or a little over 4 years. And really, I haven't very often touched on the topic of relationships. And that really should be something that I need to invest in our college students more, to talk about how to be the best, boyfriend or girlfriend or fiance or husband or wife that we can be. And so that is my hope for this series. As we go through this, you're going to discover that really a lot of this is going to be revolved around the book of Song of Solomon, or some people call it the Song of Songs. And you're going to find, if you don't know this already, that the Song of Solomon, there's a reason why there was an age restriction on that book, that children of a certain age were not allowed to read it back in that ancient Jewish times, because it can kind of get adult a little bit. But really, overall, the book is an amazing look into love, relationships, the roles that we play in relationships, and really it's a great allegory or representation of our relationship with Christ, and so on and so forth. We're really going to focus mainly on how it helps us relate to the opposite sex. So hopefully this will guide you as we do this for, I believe, about 5 weeks or so of this series. So again, if you have your Bibles, phones, if you're going to be following along, go to the book of Song of Solomon or Song of Songs. I'll probably flip back and forth as we go through this. But go to Song of Songs, chapter 1. We're going to be reading the first 3 verses. Song of Songs, chapter 1, looking at the first 3 verses. And how we're going to start this series tonight is really how the book of Song of Solomon starts, which is also how pretty much any relationship or romantic relationship starts. Attraction, or physical attraction. I've talked about this, I think, with our college students before, but like one of the thoughts that I was running through my mind with this was how I was when I was a little boy, right? And maybe other guys can relate to this. I don't know if girls can. I'm assuming maybe they can relate a little bit, but I know this can be true for guys. So when you were like 5 or 6 years old as a boy, right? Like, girls were not very interesting to you, okay? Part of it is because we didn't play or relate in the same ways, right? I know an example would be like, a girl has 2 toys and like, oh, they're kind of getting along, it's nice or whatever. But like guys, what do? Like just start like pounding on the toys and all, doing all this crazy stuff, right? Because we're kind of loud, we're rough, we like running around. Girls don't do that, so therefore they're not really interesting to us. We don't really relate to them. But then somewhere along the way, kind of in the later elementary school years, let's say maybe 4th or 5th grade, and then it might be a little bit later for other people, maybe 7th grade or 8th grade. At some point, for a guy, all of a sudden they start seeing those girls that they used to not be interested in at all. All of a sudden they start going, hey, they're not so bad to look at, right? They're kind of interesting. And I would venture to guess that for girls, maybe it's the same as well. You didn't find guys interesting. You found boys stupid or gross or whatever, but then one day they were a little bit more interesting. That's the concept of attraction, right? That's what we're talking about. There's that kind of that physical attraction there. And so I think it's really important, obviously, because romantic relationships start off with that idea of attraction. I think it's important to talk about what the Bible has to say about attraction. And it's actually a little bit more complicated than you realize. So we're really going to look at 3 different concepts of attraction the Bible touches on and how that can apply to our lives. And so once we go through that, then we'll wrap up our video. First, I'll say this. Physical attraction is biblical. Like, it's physical attraction is biblically okay. It is. This might seem maybe obvious, but like being physically attracted to somebody is completely normal. It's completely okay. And honestly, I think, which actually I'm about to do now, you can make the biblical argument that that was actually how God intended it to be. That those type of romantic relationships start with physical attraction. And we don't have to look any further than Song of Solomon, chapter 1. Look at the first 2 verses of Song of Solomon, chapter 1 with me, as we kind of begin to see that picture being painted of attraction. The first verse says this: the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. I mean, that's just literally just a brief little intro of like what this is, who's writing it, right? But then we get into verse 2. Immediately we're hit with something, right? Verse number 2. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for thy love is better than wine. It's worth noting here that throughout the book of Song of Songs, or Song of Solomon, however you want to describe it, right? That the vantage point or viewpoint is kind of flips between Solomon and then the woman that he's in love with, all right? So, and sometimes it's hard to tell as we read these different verses and chapters who is actually talking at this moment, right? And so I'll try to clarify it as we go through this series, but like specifically here, it might be a little bit obvious at this point that she's saying that it's the woman, because she's saying, let him kiss me, right? So obviously she's referring to Solomon, all right? And so there's something about immediately, like, she sees Solomon and she's like, man, that is a good looking guy, right? He is handsome. I would not mind getting a kiss from him. In fact, I would like to get a kiss from him, right? I mean, that's physical attraction. Okay, and really, again, as I said earlier, like physical attraction is clearly a part of God's plan. I mean, immediately this woman is like, I'm physically attracted to Solomon. But we see other examples in the Bible about how physical attraction is a good thing. But I think, I thought about this. Tony, Joe, and I, we've now been married for about 3.5 years now. But she knows this part of it, actually. I've talked about this with her. It might not sound politically correct, but I think everybody, if you think about it, would be probably in the same boat as me when I bring up this thought. Like, I find my wife extremely attractive. I really do. She's incredibly beautiful. People have told me she's incredibly beautiful. I don't know how I got her, but, that's how God blessed me with that, okay? But I've told her before, like, I don't know if at the very beginning when we met, if I wasn't physically attracted to her, I don't know how things would have worked out. Right? In fact, I talked about this a little bit with the college students. They laugh a little bit, but like there were other times where before I met Tony Joe and maybe I was dating or talking to other girls that like, I at first was like, well, okay, let me see where this goes. But like, what would happen is because there wasn't that strong physical attraction there, I kind of just let that go and I kind of moved on. And the reason why is it's just that physical attraction wasn't there. And I think that's okay. And I would venture to guess, I'm not going to necessarily try to speak for my wife, but I would venture to guess she would probably say the same about me. That like, it maybe wouldn't have worked out between us if she didn't necessarily find me physically attractive somehow. I don't know why she does, but somehow she does. And so the Bible talks about this, right? And this is where at times it can get a little bit awkward, but like Solomon writes about this in another book that he wrote, which is Proverbs. And he's writing to his son, and he says in Proverbs chapter 5, verse 29, he's talking to his son, and he talks about his son's future wife. And he says, let her breast satisfy thee at all times, and be thou ravished always with her love. He's saying, hey, like that physical attraction that you have towards your wife, that should always be there. You should always just find her incredibly beautiful, right? And he says, like, again, always or at all times. Therefore, it's something that is important. You go to the book of Genesis. You go to Genesis chapter 2, right? Adam's by himself. God puts him to sleep, takes a rib out of him, makes a woman. Adam wakes up, and when you look at the language of what Adam says, Adam makes it very clear. He likes what he's seeing from Eve. He likes this woman God has paired him with. You can fast forward to Genesis chapter 29, one of the most important stories that would lead to the creation of the nation of Israel. Jacob found Rachel so beautiful, he was willing to work 14 years just to be with her because he found her so incredibly attractive. Okay? So, and then on top of that, it's really cool to kind of look into this idea that how our God is a very unique creator in the fact that different people find different things attractive, right? And so it kind of weaves into this beautiful picture of how unique and diverse all of us are. It's a reflection of who God is. So really this idea of physical attractiveness, it's part of a God-honoring relationship. That is okay. It is a part of it. However, this is where we bring in the other two concepts or caveats that the Bible brings in that we have to keep in mind. And it kind of paints us a more complete picture of the physical attractiveness, of the role that physical attractiveness should play in our relationships. And the other concept here, so first, obviously, the idea that physical attractiveness is biblical, it's okay. But remember this, number two, beauty or physical attractiveness is vain. Okay, beauty and physical attractiveness can be vain. So, like, the Bible does say physical attractiveness is important, but, like, it can't be the end-all, be-all, right? I've talked about how, with some of my friends, about how there were certain, like, sitcoms that were classic sitcoms that I always loved. And one of the things that would happen in these sitcoms that was always funny was, like, the reason why some of these main characters, like, wouldn't find love was because, like, they couldn't get past maybe the physical attractiveness part, or like little things would irritate them, and so they would never like pursue a deeper relationship with somebody. Now, for us as the audience, it was funny to watch on TV, but like those characters, they never got to be with anybody because they were always miserable, right? And so it's because they got lost in that. They were too caught up in those small things and like too caught up in physical attractiveness. You know, in Proverbs chapter 31, that's actually known as, you know, the idea of like what a godly woman looks like, right? A Proverbs 31 woman. But it's written in there in Proverbs 31 verse 30 that favor is deceitful and beauty is vain. We can't put too much stock in it. What we're talking about here in that Proverbs 31 is the idea that of kind of like how beauty can be so superficial, right? It's not really deep. Or that phrase, right? Beauty is only skin deep. That can be very true. Like, I think what can happen is that we can allow that physical attractiveness to deceive us or distract us from a deeper, darker truth that's really going on. Or maybe us being so caught up in making sure we're physically attractive can maybe hide a deeper, darker truth in our own lives. A great way of looking at that, I was reminded of this, was what Jesus did when he talked to the Pharisees. Remember, he was always very critical of the religious leaders, very critical of the Pharisees. And in Matthew chapter 23, he goes to the Pharisees and he says, listen, your religion, your works, all that stuff you do, it's just basically whitewashed tombs. It's interesting, that phrase, whitewashed tombs. What he's saying is basically, maybe in modern language today, he's saying, listen, you can, like your works are nothing but like a beautiful casket. Yeah, that casket might look beautiful. Yeah, the tombstone that you put up is a beautiful tombstone. But ultimately, what's in that casket? What's in that ground? It's just dead bodies. It's just skeleton. There's no life there. And it's like he was trying to say, your religion means nothing, right? Now, take that and apply that to the idea of beauty. Yeah, it looks great, but like, it doesn't mean anything ultimately if like inside you are not following Christ like you should. You are not living the way that you should. It can really distract us from who a person is or who we really are. In fact, we'll actually talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Listen, it's not bad to be attracted to somebody. Clearly it's not. It is biblical. But again, keep in mind, beauty is superficial. It doesn't last. Okay? I'm not going to necessarily, hopefully I don't make women mad when I say this, but like, women, you go through, like if you are going to have children, you're going to go through those childbearing years where you are maybe not the same as you were years before. Men, No matter how often we work out, when it comes to a certain age, we might have a little bit of a gut, right? Maybe our skin begins to wrinkle. Maybe certain diseases or injuries that happen to us maybe disfigure us or make us look different in some way. Like, those things are going to happen. And so we have to understand ultimately that beauty and physical attractiveness, while it's a good thing, is ultimately something that is superficial and we can't get, especially in light of other aspects that are more important in our relationship. So we see, obviously, beauty is biblically okay. Physical attractiveness is okay. It's biblically okay. All right? But it is vain. And the last thing I'll look at, and we'll begin to wrap up, it is also beauty and physical attractiveness can be arbitrary. And here's what I mean by the idea of being arbitrary, is that beauty and attractiveness and that standard kind of changes and varies between not only like people, but it really can vary in between cultures, right? Again, I remember listening and reading from Matt Chandler talking about this and how he said that he had some family that lived in Asia. And so he would actually go to Asia sometimes to visit his family. And he said, it was interesting because he said, I'm over there, and he says, like, I've noticed that, like, when I would go to places that would maybe sell beauty products, or there's advertisements selling beauty products, like, the way they were portraying beauty was actually, like, lighter skin. It was almost like sometimes he said it was almost like they were trying to bleach their skin. He said, but then I come back to Dallas, Texas. That's where Matt kind of lives, in that area. And he goes, I drive by tanning salons, right? Because women here kind of, especially women, although men can do this too, they maybe want to be a little bit more on the tan side or whatever. And it was interesting to see how it can vary between cultures. Like, what one culture considers attractive or beautiful, another culture maybe doesn't. It varies. It's arbitrary that way. Even like you look at like just in history. You look at maybe old paintings in the Middle Ages of like women that were obviously supposed to be considered beautiful that maybe by today's standards we wouldn't necessarily find beautiful. Or even like an interesting thing that's happened over the years. I know it's changed a little bit now, but like when you look at like the evolution of like the Barbie doll and how the Barbie doll used to look 50 years ago, looked different than 30 years ago. Then it looked different even 10 years ago. And finally, I think Barbie had tried, the Barbie Corporation or whoever makes it, just maybe try to change it a little bit more to be a little better about that. But what was happening was the Barbie doll was like conforming to what was considered these standards of what beauty and attractiveness is. And, you know, it's almost just like lust or our lustful eyes can like drive society to tell us what is beautiful and what is attractive, right? And women can get lost in that, right? They become so obsessed. Okay, well, I got to make sure I'm beautiful. I got to make sure I look good, right? And men can get lost in that, like the idea of like, I want to find the most beautiful girl I can ever find. They got to have all these type of physical attributes, otherwise I'm not going to be interested. And what happens is a woman can lose herself and not focus on what she needs to focus on to make herself a better person, a better, more Christ-like person, while a man is not looking for the type of woman that he should be looking for. Instead, he's just driven by looks. It can be the same thing for men. Maybe there's not that same beauty or physical attractiveness standard. Maybe it's not as stringent, but there is the concept of masculinity. And like, what does that mean? Because we want to be masculine to attract a lady, right? Well, in the 60s, being a hippie was kind of something for men to do. Then 10 or 15 years later, it like swung the other way. You had to be ultra manly and masculine and almost to the point of being crass, actually. Right? And then it changed in the 90s, and there were different things there. And it, like that idea, the idea of masculinity can really confuse us men because, like, okay, well, what does it mean to be masculine? What does it mean to be a man? Like, even I get caught up in that. And what happens is, well, today they say masculinity is here, but like, I don't really feel like I measure up to that, or these are not necessarily things I do. I'm, you know, and therefore we begin to think, well, maybe I'm not masculine. Maybe I can't. Maybe I need to pursue that so I can make sure I attract a woman. All right. Again, or maybe a woman looks for a man she shouldn't be looking for because again she has a certain view of what masculinity should be. And so what happens is the reason why, and this cycle continues, and the reason why this can be so vicious is that, I mean, in the blink of an eye, the snap of a finger, beauty and attractiveness standards change. It just does. It's arbitrary. And instead of pursuing all of that so much, we need to pursue and make sure we understand ultimately, how do I become a better person? How do I be more Christ-like? This is kind of how I wrap up. Because yeah, beauty is biblical, but it can be vain. It can be arbitrary. How do we respond as Christians then to that? Here's how. We follow Solomon's example. Because in verse number 3, remember I told you if you can't, just keep your Bibles open to verse number 3 of Song of Solomon, chapter 1. The woman, remember, she says, I want this guy to kiss me because he's great looking. But then she also says this, verse 3. Because of the savor of thy good ointments, thy name is as ointment poured forth. Therefore do the virgins love thee. What she's saying is, Solomon, hey, you know what? You're a great looking man. But one of the reasons why, so I'm physically attracted to you, but I'm really attracted to you as well because not only are you good looking, you're as good looking on the inside, right? Like you're talking about that ointment being poured out, almost just like saying, hey, the name Solomon just goes down smoothly. Why? Because I know you're a good man. You have a good reputation. When she says, hey, the virgins love you, she's saying, hey, my friends, my friends and other ladies, they like you. In fact, if you asked one of them out, they probably wouldn't say no. They probably would like that. All right. In fact, some of them are probably thinking, kiss me, right? Just like I am. And so she's saying they think you're good too. They see your character. Guys, that's what we have to do. We have to make sure, again, it's okay to want to be physically attractive. It's okay to want somebody that is physically attractive. But don't lose sight of how ultimately the heart plays into this that is way more important than beauty or physical attractiveness. I'll wrap it with this. Peter wrote about this as well. In 1 Peter chapter 3, remember, Peter and Paul, some of these guys in the New Testament, they're really writing letters to different churches and groups of people. And in 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 3 and 4, Peter is talking to specifically wives, although, again, you can probably begin to see how you can apply that to everybody no matter what. But he kind of instructs them, and he says this, whose adorning, let it not be that outward adorning of the plaiting the hair, and of wearing of gold, or of putting on of apparel, but let it be the hidden man of the heart, and that which is not corruptible, even the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit, which is in the sight of God of great price. Peter is saying, listen, it's okay to want to do those things, but ultimately, do not neglect the heart. Do not neglect being Christ-like. He even mentions the idea of having a meek and quiet spirit. Humility, that's what's important. Because when you are humble, you know what happens? You actually begin to attract other people regardless of how you maybe look. So just don't forget, being physically attractive, that's great. Being physically attracted to someone, that's biblical. But it's also something that is superficial. Don't allow that to drive everything that you do in a relationship with somebody. Don't allow it to drive everything that you do as you try to better yourself as a person. It's not about how you look, it's about what your heart says. Just like the woman that Solomon talks about. Just like what Peter talks about. So anyway, that's how we started off. Don't forget, we'll continue to keep doing this. Next time you'll see a video, we'll probably be talking about more of the dating and courtship aspect of it. All right, so now the physical attractiveness thing is out of the way. Solomon and the woman, they like each other. They find each other attractive. Now we're starting to get into a little bit of a deeper relationship, and we'll learn more about that and the biblical aspects of that as well. Thanks so much, guys, for tuning in. Hopefully this is something that will be a benefit to you. God bless you.